My name is Alara, and for 20 years I was a ghost in my own life. The end came not with a bang, but with the slow grinding whir of a ventilator and the hollow ache of my own body giving out. I had poured every last ounce of myself into raising my 2 sons, only to see the light in their eyes dim, replaced by a resentment I couldn't understand. My husband, Kalen, had been my jailer, his infidelity a 15-year-old open secret, and the 1,000 yuan he tossed me each month was the paltry price of my confinement. When I opened my eyes again, the sterile white of the hospital was gone. I was standing in the living room of the first home Kalen and I had bought together, the air thick with the scent of his cheap cologne and the acrid tang of betrayal. A sharp pain throbbed on my forehead. My fingers came away stained with blood. Memory crashed over me like a wave. This was the day. The day I found the receipt for a diamond necklace that was never mine. The day our shouting match ended with his shove, the sickening crack of my skull against the glass coffee table, and the darkness that followed. In my previous life, I had woken up insistent on divorce, only to be worn down by the chorus of his relatives. Just bear with it, they'd said. Isn't this how every family is? My own sister, Serafina, had begged me to come home, but my pride had become my prison. I stayed, a stubborn monument to a marriage that had long since rotted, refusing to make way for the other woman, Leora. My stubbornness didn't hurt them, it only killed me. A cold, unfamiliar clarity settled in my mind. This time everything would be different. I stumbled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. A thin trail of blood marred my brow. It wasn't enough. The injury was real, but the story needed to be undeniable. My eyes, once dull with exhaustion, now held a glint of steely purpose. I looked around, my gaze landing on a heavy glass vase on the vanity. Without a second thought, I picked it up and smashed it against the already wounded spot. Fresh, hot blood welled and spilled down my temple. The pain was sharp and bright, a necessary sacrament for my rebirth. I looked at my reflection, the blood, the wildness in my eyes, and I finally smiled. It was a grim, satisfied thing. With blood still dripping, I ran out of the apartment, letting a panicked whimper escape my lips. I timed it perfectly, bursting out of my door just as Mrs. Albright, the building's most prolific gossip, was shuffling down the hallway. Help! I cried, my voice trembling with awe I didn't know I possessed. Please help me. My husband is going to kill me. Mrs. Albright's eyes widened with a mix of horror and voracious curiosity. What? That bastard, she exclaimed, pulling me into a bony, perfumed hug. Don't you worry, dear. He wouldn't dare. I'm calling the police right now. Tell me everything. I buried my face in her shoulder, careful to let the blood smear on her expensive silk blouse. I can't go on, I sobbed. He's been seeing another woman. He said I should make way for her or he'd kill me. I gave him 2 sons. I served his family for years and he never has a kind word. And now he wants to buy a house for that woman. I felt her body tense with outrage. I had no doubt she would weave my tear-stained, blood-smeared account into an epic tale of martyrdom that would spread through the entire complex before lunch. The police arrived swiftly. A young female officer, her face a mask of professional calm, took one look at me and her jaw tightened. She first took me to a clinic to have the wound dressed. A suspected brainstem injury, the report would later say, and then brought me to the station to give my statement. It wasn't long before Kalen was summoned. He strode into the station lobby, his face a thundercloud of irritation. The moment he saw the officers, it melted into an unctuous, ingratiating smile. "Officers, my deepest apologies," he said, bowing slightly. "A simple marital quarrel. Nothing serious. So sorry to trouble you." The young female officer who had taken my statement slammed her hand on the desk. "You know perfectly well whether this was a quarrel or domestic violence," she snapped. He acted with such impunity. I knew that for marital disputes, mediation was the primary approach. Kalen, after giving his statement, came out bowing and scraping. Yes, I'll definitely change. You're absolutely right to educate me." The moment he turned to face me, his eyes filled with a ferocious promise of later retribution. I didn't give him the chance. In front of everyone, I let my eyes roll back and fainted. The performance secured me a hospital examination and a diagnosis that would make any future quarrel legally perilous for him. We returned home that night in a tense, silent truce. The battlefield was set. I had fired the first very public shot. And I knew with a chilling certainty that the real war was just beginning. The family tribunal was coming, and this time I was ready. The silence in the apartment the next day was a physical presence, thick and heavy with unsaid things. Kaylin had left early, slamming the door, no doubt to seek solace with Leora. I spent the morning not in tears but in quiet, methodical planning. I knew his family. Their arrival was as inevitable as the tide. Around 1 in the afternoon the storm broke. The door flew open without a knock, and in marched Kaylin's sister, Rhiannon, her face a permanent scowl of disapproval. Behind her shuffled his mother, Morwen, the master manipulator who played the saint while her son played the devil. Rhiannon's eyes scanned the room, landing on the bowl of noodles I was calmly eating for lunch. Her lip curled. "Alara, my brother works himself to the bone to earn money. Keeping you at home is just for cooking and cleaning. Now that we're here, there isn't even a bite to eat or a drop of water to drink." In my previous life this gaslighting had worked. For years I had believed that the 3,000 yuan a month Kaylin gave me, which had to cover everything from groceries and utilities to our son's school fees and social obligations, was a grand generosity. I had budgeted with the precision of a field marshal, believing the lie that everything in this household was supported by him. But the truth was, every appliance, every sack of rice, was a discounted item I had scrimped and scrambled for. If I hadn't managed the finances, Kaylin, with his 50 yuan packs of cigarettes, would have been bankrupt. Not a single penny of that money was ever spent on me. I slurped up the last of my noodles with deliberate loudness, then set the bowl down with a sharp clatter. I wiped my mouth slowly. "Auntie," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "You didn't even give me a heads up before coming. What was I supposed to cook for you?" I jutted my chin toward the trash can, where shards of the vase I'd broken still lay. "And I can't even offer you water. Kaylin smashed everything in the house yesterday. This injury on my head. That's from a glass he threw." I saw Morwen's eyes flicker. I pressed my advantage. "Eldest aunt, I only have 3,000 yuan a month to manage this whole household. Last year when you had your second child I gave you 1,200 as a gift. Birthdays, my hospital stays. There were plenty of occasions for you to return the favor. Give it back to me now and I'll go buy groceries for you right away." Rhiannon was so infuriated her face turned a mottled purple. "You." Before she could continue, Morwen switched to her saintly act, placing a hand on her daughter's arm. "Oh come on. What couple doesn't argue? It was wrong of Kaylin to hit you." Her tone shifted to gentle reproach. "But you shouldn't have called the police either. Family matters shouldn't be aired outside the home." In her previous life she couldn't control the one outside, so she thought I was an easy target. She brainwashed me, saying her in-laws were all on my side and once I endured it, that woman would have nothing. I sneered. Not only did I say it, but I also had someone come over to check. On cue, a commotion arose in the hallway. Mrs. Albright had arrived with her posse of elderly friends. "This is the one," she announced, pointing a dramatic finger in our direction. "That bastard betrayed her and hit her. Hitting his own wife. I wonder how his mother raised him." Morwen's face instantly hardened, the saintly mask slipping. I laid out the injury assessment photos from the hospital, one after another. The bruises were a shocking lurid purple. "None of you try to talk me out of it," I declared, my voice ringing with a conviction that startled even me. "I'm definitely getting a divorce. If I don't, I'll sue him." Kaylin, who had likely been listening from the hallway, burst in, his pride finally shattered. "Fine. Let's divorce. I've long wanted out of this marriage." I could see the conflict warring on Morwen's face. She didn't want the divorce. She knew her son was almost 40 with nothing to his name except this marital home, which had drained the family savings. He would never find another fool of a woman as hardworking and uncomplaining as me. It was then that my 2 sons appeared at the doorstep as if summoned by the tension. Lysander, the elder, and Orion, the younger. Their eyes met mine, and in that electric moment I saw it. A cold, ancient understanding that did not belong to children. I knew. My sons had also been reborn. "I want to live with Grandma," Lysander said, his voice flat. "Me too. I want to go with Dad and Grandma," Orion echoed, not looking at me. The 3 of us locked eyes. Understanding flashed between us, a silent pact forged in the fires of a shared, miserable past. Morwen, upon seeing her two grandsons seemingly choosing their father's side, beamed with a triumphant joy. "Ah, my two precious grandsons. Grandma hasn't spoiled you for nothing." The public mockery and the defection of her grandsons solidified her decision. "Divorce, it must be done." Kaylin looked at me and smiled smugly as if to say, "See? Without me you have nothing. Not even your sons." I almost laughed. He had no idea how expensive it was to raise a child, or that he had just welcomed two vipers into his nest. The house wasn't in my name and I had paid for the renovation. When it came to dividing the assets, I knew what was coming. But this time I was ready for them. The feast was over. The serpents were turning on their master. The divorce proceedings were a grotesque pantomime. As I anticipated, Morwen had the audacity to claim the house was bought by the Vance family. "At most we'll give you 30,000, she said, her voice syrupy with false magnanimity. "Take it or leave it. Or you can just take the furniture." The furniture was nearly a decade old, worn down by the years of my labor. My family was out of town and she was certain I wouldn't be able to haul it away. He was wrong. I was not going to indulge her. I would not leave my dowry for Kaylin and Leora to enjoy. If I was to move out so the other woman could move in, I would leave them a shell. I directly called Mrs. Albright and her friends. "Aunties," I said, my voice heavy with feigned resignation. "I have to leave. Kaylin's new wife is moving in. Please take whatever you fancy from this place. I can't bear to see my things used by her." It was like releasing a flock of well-dressed vultures. They descended with a gleeful energy, carrying off the television, the standing lamp, the good china, and the silk curtains. For the unwanted items, the scratched dining table, the lumpy sofa, I called the scrap collector from the end of the street and had him haul it all away. Kaylin watched, his face turning a deeper shade of green with each piece that left his home. "Ilara," he seethed, his voice a low growl. "You have such a vicious heart." I rolled my eyes, a gesture I had never dared in my previous life. "Would leaving my dowry for you and that woman be considered not vicious?" I asked sweetly. The divorce certificate was issued, a flimsy piece of paper that felt like a pardon from a death sentence. Kaylin, freed from the shackles of our marriage, quickly set a wedding date with Leora. On their wedding day, my sister Serafina arrived. She was a force of nature, her anger a righteous storm. Early in the morning, she set off firecrackers on the street in front of their residential building, a gong and drum team she'd hired playing a raucous, celebratory tune. All the neighbors knew Kaylin was getting remarried, so the noise wasn't out of the ordinary. Serafina handed out candy to everyone she met, beaming brighter than the bride. Baffled passers-by asked, "Something happy at home?" "Congratulations." Grinning from ear to ear, she shoved handfuls of candy into their hands. "Yes, something happy. My sister got divorced." With that she pointed upward. She had hung a massive scarlet banner over the main entrance of the building. It read, "Celebrating my sister's divorce from the heartless Kaylin Vance." And in smaller letters below, "Celebrating the ex-husband's second marriage." The newly arrived Leora, however, refused to keep a low profile. She insisted on entering through the main gate of the neighborhood in a garish red bridal sedan chair, only to run headlong into my sister's procession. Seeing her approach, Serafina turned and waved her hand, shouting to the band, "Come on, play the music. Welcome the new bride." Everyone present, thoroughly briefed by the neighborhood aunties, understood the situation perfectly. The onlookers enjoyed the juicy gossip with great relish. The bride was supposed to step out of the sedan chair and cross a fire basin, but Leora refused to show herself. A faint, tearful voice could be heard from inside the sedan. "Go away." Kaylin, the main character of this humiliating spectacle, was subjected to the piercing stares and pointed fingers of the crowd. He was utterly humiliated. From across the street, sitting in the safety of Serafina's car, I took in the entire scene. A lump formed in my throat. I remembered in my previous life before my own wedding Serafina coming to my room, her face full of worry. "Ilara, you were such a well-behaved child. Why won't you listen now? You insist on marrying someone from out of town. If you get bullied in the future, your family won't be able to help you." Back then I didn't understand the sorrow in her eyes. I had been so eager to build my own life that I saw her concern as interference. Only now did I realize that blood ties are the hardest bonds to sever. I had left, but the favors I did for the aunties weren't for nothing. They had promised to watch over my two sons, ensuring they weren't bullied and to keep me updated regularly. They were my eyes and ears inside the fortress I had just left. As I watched Kalen's new life begin in a circus of his own making, I knew the first act of my revenge was complete. I had given him a dowry of ashes and a marriage born in scandal. Now it was time to sit back and watch it burn. I had only been home for 2 peaceful days when my aunt, one of my key informants, came to vent to me. "Ilara, that new wife Kalen married, Leora, is really not an easy one," she began, her eyes alight with the thrill of bearing bad news. "She says women are meant to be pampered, not treated like maids. Kalen has to cook for her every day after work. If he gets off late, they eat out." My aunt was standing up for me, but I actually felt quite happy hearing it. Leora was only 21, a high school graduate who had entered the workforce early. Her social circle wasn't high enough to meet any quality men, so when she came across Kalen, a homeowner, she thought he was a great catch. Though not drop-dead gorgeous, her youth and kitschy charm made up for it. Kalen was willing to spoil her and spend money, but he never stopped to consider whether his wallet could handle it. He could manage cooking for a week, but there was no way he could keep it up for a month. Especially when I was at home before. I took care of everything without him lifting a finger. How could he possibly endure such hardship now? Sure enough, it wasn't long before my aunt gleefully told me that Kalen had been going grocery shopping every day lately. He didn't understand that the best produce required early morning competition and the cheapest deals demanded perfect timing to snatch up leftovers. Yet he seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself, even updating his social media feed with pictures of him and Leora strolling through the supermarket, their cart filled with expensive snacks, premium fruits and small portions of organic vegetables neatly wrapped in cling film. A scene of harmony and warmth with Leora looking blissfully happy. I knew it wouldn't be long before they started arguing. I never expected their first fight to come so soon, overheard by me when Lysander connected his smartwatch to my phone and left it in his backpack, which was in their living room. "How much can you possibly spend just buying groceries?" Kalen's voice was a frustrated snarl. "Isn't 400 yuan a week enough for you? Can't you cut back on snacks? Didn't you eat those snacks too?" Leora shot back, her voice trembling. "You married me. Didn't you promise to treat me well for a lifetime? Now you're even complaining about me having some snacks? If I'd known it would be like this, I should have just married someone my own age." As she spoke, she began to cry. Hearing her tears, Kalen's heart softened and he lowered his voice to comfort her. All right. We've been eating out too much this month. Next month we'll cook at home. You buy the groceries and I'll do the cooking." "Okay." The two of them got back together, all lovey-dovey again. Listening on the phone, I couldn't help but sneer. Two people who had never been weighed down by the daily grind of life, without an ounce of reverence for its cost. Life would teach them a lesson soon enough. Not 2 peaceful days had passed before trouble brewed again. The money Kalen gave to Leora was meant to cover all the household expenses. As a result, she thought that the 2 children only needed to prepare a week's living expenses for their stay at boarding school. But she didn't know that when children returned to school on Sundays, their families would also prepare extra snacks, fruits and milk for them to eat between meals. Naturally, my sons didn't mention it to her. Nor did they bother Kalen with it. They simply lowered their heads in silence when their classmates curiously asked why they didn't bring any snacks. When the other children went home and mentioned that the Vance brothers had no fruits or milk and had to eat others, the parents naturally understood what was going on. The aunties, taking their grandchildren out for a walk, met Kalen and half-jokingly, half-admonishingly said, "Kalen, they say a stepmother means a stepfather. If you can't handle it, maybe you should send the 2 kids to their mother." Kalen got scolded again and was utterly annoyed. He was tired of cooking too. So he gave Leora an earful and completely dumped all the household chores on her. Under the guise of not having enough money, he said he would work more overtime, leaving all the household responsibilities to her. They brainwashed her again. "Look at your girlfriends who are still working in factories, living in dormitories or renting places. None of them have it as good as you. Look at you, living in a big house, not having to wake up early, just cooking meals. This family had always been good at the game of slapping and then offering a sweet. They used to do it to me and now they were doing the same to Leora. To put it bluntly, they were just selfish and only cared about themselves." Leora's gilded cage was becoming tarnished, the locks tightening. And from my vantage point, I could see the bars beginning to bend under the weight of their shared delusions. Time flew by and soon it was the new year. In her past life, Leora's obsession was for Kaylin to take her home and have his mother acknowledge her, rather than being without any formal status. Now that she had achieved her wish and become the rightful daughter-in-law of the Vance family, she genuinely considered herself a part of it and thus more readily accepted their brainwashing and emotional manipulation. On New Year's Eve, Kaylin video called me. I took the call and the ones who appeared on the screen were my two sons, their faces etched with a reluctance that was pure artistry. Before I could speak, Morwen's face filled the frame, smiling widely. Oh, these two kids, it's only right to wish their mom a happy new year. Why the reluctance? It's all my fault for spoiling them. She turned her saccharine gaze to me. Elara, don't take it to heart. Kaylin also chimed in with feigned seriousness. Exactly. Lysander Orion. Wish your mom a happy new year and I'll give you big red envelopes. Watching the smug expressions of the Vance family on my phone, I couldn't help but beam with joy. My son's acting was really good. The less close they were to me, the more they integrated into the Vance family, the easier it was to turn it upside down. Happy New Year, Lysander muttered before quickly turning his face away. But the Vance family thought it was a face-saving gesture and smiled as they bid me farewell. I heard a background voice say, "Here, two kids, 200 each." I also smiled and said goodbye. Putting down my phone, I met my mother's disapproving look at the dinner table. She pursed her lips. Ungrateful children. All that love wasted on you. I smiled and picked up a piece of meat for her. All right, they'll understand when they grow up. Then I abruptly changed the subject. Is Uncle Lin setting up a factory? Do you want me to go help? Mother was taken aback. How did you know? Of course I knew. In my previous life, my mother had also asked me if I wanted to earn some extra money. The pay wasn't low. Calculated monthly, it was even higher than Kaylin's salary. But Kaylin hadn't agreed, believing it was better for me to stay home and take care of the household chores. So I had let it go. Little did I know that later, Uncle Lin became prosperous, his factory growing larger. The employees who had weathered the tough times with him in the early days were all given shares, receiving tens of thousands in dividends every year. The regret of that missed opportunity had festered in me for a lifetime. My friend mentioned it. I lied smoothly. I want to do it, Mom. I want to earn money to support you in your old age. Compared to the unbearable days of my past life, being away from Kaylin, not having to raise children and just focusing on earning money felt absolutely amazing. At the start of the year, I returned to Kaylin's city and began working at Uncle Lin's factory. He teased me, saying, "You work like a starving ghost devouring a meal." I smiled without speaking. He was right. If I had been able to secure this job and have my own income in my previous life, I wouldn't have faced the hardships that followed. Now that I had regained what was lost, I naturally cherished it all the more. Meanwhile, the unraveling of Kaylin's household continued. Time flew by and the children reached their third year of junior high. This year Morwen fell ill. In my previous life, it was at this juncture that Kaylin and I began living separately. Now it was Leora's turn to endure. Nearly a year had passed and she had long been worn down by life, transformed from a carefree young woman who only needed to enjoy others' support into a resentful wife. Money that barely sufficed with careful budgeting, an infuriating stepson who acted innocent, and a husband who shirked all responsibilities the moment he came home. This was not the married life she had envisioned. Now that her mother-in-law was ill, no matter how unwilling she was, she had to attend to her bedside. For two people who already disliked each other, being forced to share the same space naturally led to even more conflicts. At this point, Morwen began to recall my kindness and sent Kaylin to invite me to take care of her for a few days. I was shocked by this family's shamelessness, yet still smiled and agreed. After all, we were once family. It's only right that I help in times of need. A year apart, with good food, drink, and less stress, I had grown rosy-cheeked and visibly healthier. A far cry from how he remembered me. Kaylin looked at me with an entirely different expression. "Elara," he said, his voice soft. "I'm actually starting to regret this now." I smiled as I saw him out, then quickly grabbed disinfectant wipes to scrub my hands where he had touched them over and over. This guy was jinxed when it came to wives. Anyone who ended up with him was doomed to bad luck. When I arrived at the hospital with a thermal lunchbox, Morwen was practically more delighted to see me than her own daughter. "Oh my Elara, come here. Come sit down." As I laid out the prepared stew and nutritious meals, the other patients in the room were green with envy. "Oh my, is this your daughter?" Indeed, one's own daughter is always dearer. "She looks much better than that daughter-in-law you brought the other day." I smiled without saying a word, while Morwen averted her gaze, looking awkward. That afternoon in the hospital room, she spent the whole time complaining to me about how Leora didn't meet her expectations in every way. "She's young," I said placatingly. "In a couple of years she'll know everything. People are just plain ungrateful. Only after losing something and having a comparison do they remember how good things were before. But at their core they're utterly selfish." The Vance family was all the same. Leora enjoyed 2 peaceful days before Lysander told her I was at the hospital. She exploded instantly. My son messaged me, urging me to leave quickly. I retreated and hid at a distance, watching as Leora stormed into the ward furiously, followed by the loud bang of the insulated food container being knocked over. "I've served your Vance family all these years and now you regret it? You think Alaire is better? Let me tell you, no way." The room erupted again with the sound of things being smashed. That same day I received a text from Kaylin. "Would you be willing to remarry me? If only for the sake of the child." I read the message, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. The unraveling was complete. The trap was set. And he was walking right into it. "Remarry?" I texted back. "We will, but not now." Kaylin's mother was so humiliated at the hospital she had to transfer, costing yet another sum of money. Leora couldn't possibly go to take care of her, and to avoid suspicion I certainly wouldn't go again. At this point, only her 2 eldest grandsons could take turns staying with her after school. They casually mentioned that school required extra tutoring. How could she possibly disagree? The Vance family's money was now controlled by Leora, who refused to comply and flatly rejected the expenses for the tutors. In Kaylin's eyes she showed no respect to his parents above and mistreated his children below, completely eroding his feelings for her. To force Leora into a divorce, he stopped giving her living expenses and frequently beat and scolded her. I calculated the time. It was about time to go find her. In a quiet cafe, Leora sat across from me, looking completely different from the vibrant girl I'd seen over a year ago. Her hair was tied into a lank, low ponytail with stray strands falling at her temples. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her gaze was dull as if she had aged 10 years overnight. Noticing the hostility in her eyes, I smiled gently. "Actually, we're the same," I began. "Both victims deceived by Kaylin Vance. You've realized it by now, haven't you? What he says and what he does are entirely different things." She looked down, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Don't think I'm here to show off," I continued. "Just look at the Vance family. Do you really think I have any lingering affection for that mess? I truly had no choice. Both my sons are tied to the Vances. You're only 22. If you turn back now, your life is still yours to live. You thought you were marrying for love, but look how that turned out. If you get pregnant, your life will be even harder." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Whether you stay or leave, the Vance family's property will be split 3 ways. How much do you think your child would really get? Throwing away your whole life for this, it's just not worth it." In her previous life she had gotten pregnant around this time. If she gave birth, it would mean competition for my son's inheritance. I needed her to see the light. Leora figured it out. She took the initiative to file for divorce. She came into the marriage with nothing, so naturally she left with nothing. She took the child she was carrying, a fact she confirmed to me with a tearful nod, and demanded 30,000 in emotional damages from Kaylin. I nodded. That's the price. That was the price for a woman abandoned by Kaylin Vance. As a woman myself, seeing her pale and fragile appearance, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Wasting her youth for this family and damaging her own health. It was truly not worth it. After their divorce, Kaylin immediately proposed remarriage. I refused, only agreeing to return to the family but not to remarry him. "You need to show sincerity," I told him. He temporarily agreed. Day after day he took charge of grocery shopping, cooking and household chores. I focused on working hard and taking good care of our 2 sons. In this life, I now had the means to afford the tutoring classes my sons couldn't attend before. Even if they refused, I insisted they go. What I didn't have in my past life I would make up for doubly in this one. When spending money on my sons, I never asked Kalen for a single cent. Whether his money went to groceries or daily expenses, I never interfered. In fact, I sometimes even spent my own money to stock the fridge with good things. Now he was suddenly eager to hand over his finances for me to manage. I still refused. Now remarriage and financial control were like a piece of meat dangling in front of him. He would only run forward if he wanted to eat it. Once obtained, he would start slacking off. Human nature is cheap. And Kaylin Vance was outrageously so. Since her last illness, Morwen's health had been getting worse. She spent half of every month lying in bed. I knew she wouldn't live much longer. I took care of her by her bedside even more attentively than Kaylin. And she kept hoping every day that we would remarry soon. "Mom, your health is the most important thing," I told her one day, feigning deep concern. "Let's go to the hospital for a checkup." The examination revealed mid to late stage lung cancer. The doctor explained that chemotherapy could cost hundreds of thousands and might not even cure it, while conservative treatment would only give her this year. I ran up and down inquiring about commercial insurance, but they clearly stated they didn't accept those already diagnosed. I made sure all the neighbors saw my efforts. One of them, Mrs. Finch, saw me and asked in confusion, "Elara, that family treated you like that. Why are you still coming back to jump into the fire pit? Why can't you think clearly?" I just smiled without answering. How could they possibly realize that the foolish woman before them, who was wholeheartedly devoted to the in-laws who had hurt her, was actually planning her final perfect revenge? Kalen was moved. At the dinner table, his face was full of remorse. "Elara, I was too foolish before and couldn't see that you were the only one who truly cared for me. From now on, let's live happily together as a family of 4. Okay." As he spoke with deep emotion, his eyes actually welled with tears. I watched that crocodile tear and exchanged a glance with our 2 sons. We all knew he wasn't truly remorseful. He was just afraid. Afraid that we might abandon him now. Afraid that I, who could make money, was living well on my own. But both my son and I were people who had lived through hell once before, demons clawing our way back from the abyss. How could we possibly soften our hearts because of his few hypocritical words? The kind are bullied, the tame are ridden. Morwen passed away as expected. And under the weight of his grief and fear, Kalen finally wore me down. We went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got our marriage certificate. The prodigal wife had returned. And she had brought hell back with her. The night we remarried, Kalen held me and cried bitter, drunken tears, confessing his mistakes into my unresponsive shoulder. I endured his hypocritical embrace, my mind clear and cold. "Kalen," I whispered, my voice soft with feigned fear. "I was so scared when Mom passed away. It was so sudden." I felt him stiffen. "After going through so much, we finally have a stable little home. If I suddenly fall seriously ill and it's incurable, that's one thing. But what I fear most is not having the money for treatment." I pulled back slightly, looking into his bleary eyes. Should we buy some insurance? Just to be safe." He found this reasoning quite sound. My fear seemed genuine, and the idea of financial security appealed to his selfish nature. He readily agreed. That weekend we went to the insurance company. I had done my research. I guided him toward a high-coverage life insurance policy, the premiums of which would be a manageable stretch for his salary. The agent explained the terms and Kalen nodded along, his mind still clouded by grief and his desire to please me. Watching him finally pick up the pen and sign his name on the contract, a profound, almost spiritual calm settled over me. The weight that had been in my heart for 2 lifetimes was completely lifted at last. My signature was already on the line as the sole, irrevocable beneficiary. From that moment on, all that was left was to quietly await that day's arrival. According to my son's account from our previous life, as their university's opening day approached, Kalen, to save on travel expenses, had chosen to take a bus to register for them. That bus was involved in a chain reaction collision on a mountain road, plummeted off a cliff, and there were no survivors. In this life, with the monthly fortune I spent on hiring top-tier private tutors, Lysander's academic performance had improved by leaps and bounds. He was admitted to a prestigious university far to the south. It was a triumph, making up for the regrets of our previous life. As the date approached, I put my plan into motion. "I've booked our tickets," I announced brightly one evening. "I'm taking the boys down a week early to get them settled. It's a beautiful city, We can make a family trip of it. Kalen grunted, not looking up from his phone. A trip? Sounds expensive. Just put them on the bus. I smiled. Oh, don't be such a bore, Kalen. Our son's only wish after getting into a prestigious university, and you dare to refuse. I adopted a teasing, commanding tone. I've bought your ticket too. It's the fastest train available. Sleep on it tonight and you'll arrive tomorrow. I've already paid for it. If I don't see you tomorrow, you're in big trouble, I'm telling you. He complained about the cost, about taking time off work, but the combination of my insistence, the implication that I was spending my own money, and the lure of a family trip that required little effort from him eventually wore him down. The promise of a reunion, of playing the proud father for a few days, was the final hook. The next day my sons and I stood on the platform of the gleaming high-speed rail station, watching our train arrive. It was safe, modern, and would get us to our destination in a few hours. Kalen's train, the slow, outdated overnight sleeper he had insisted was good enough, was leaving from a different station on a different, far more dangerous mountain route. We boarded our train and found our seats. The atmosphere was tense. We didn't speak. We just waited. The next morning we arrived safely in the southern city. We checked into a modest hotel near the university, the three of us sharing a room. We gathered in front of the television, the local news channel playing softly in the background. We were a portrait of a family on the cusp of a new beginning, but our eyes were fixed on the screen, waiting for the end. Then we saw it. A news bulletin, a reporter standing in front of a chaotic scene of emergency vehicles and a twisted guardrail. The graphic at the bottom of the screen read, "Fatal crash on mountain highway, no survivors expected." The details were sparse, but the route number and the type of bus matched perfectly. The mother and her two sons looked at each other. There were no tears of grief. Instead, a wave of cathartic, unburdening relief washed over us. We wept, embracing each other, our tears not of sorrow but of release. We were wiping away 20 years of pain, of servitude, of being overlooked and trampled upon. I pulled back and looked out the window of our hotel room. The sky, which had been overcast for days, had cleared, stretching into a brilliant, endless blue without a single cloud. The storm was finally over. After Kalen's death, the process of claiming the insurance compensation was clean and tidy. The policy was straightforward, the cause of death unambiguous. The insurance company cut a substantial check without a fuss, the money a cold, numerical representation of a life of misery and its calculated end. It wasn't until the official list of victims was released in the news that Rhiannon, Kalen's sister, learned the truth. She immediately stormed into what was now my house, her face contorted with rage and greed. "This is my brother's house," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. You drove him to his death and now you think you can steal his property? Get out. Take your brats and get out." Her voice was so loud that neighbors from across the hall and upstairs came out to see what was happening. They formed a small, murmuring crowd in the hallway. After hearing her tirade, a young woman I barely knew, a new neighbor, rolled her eyes. "Miss, do you even know the law?" she said, her voice laced with scorn. "They are the legal first heirs. The wife and children. If you try to kick them out, they can sue you for illegally occupying someone else's property, you know." Another voice, Mrs. Albright's, chimed in. "Oh, I remember her. A few years ago when the Vance family divorced Alara and brought in the other woman, wasn't she there too, cheering it on? I always thought this family was no good. The dam broke." The crowd, once merely curious, now turned into a chorus of condemnation, each person adding their own criticism. How shameless to act so disgracefully. Trying to drive someone out when they're raising two of your Vance family's children? Absolutely disgraceful. I stood in the doorway, smiling at Rhiannon without saying a word. With so many people chiming in, she was thoroughly humiliated. Her face, once flushed with anger, now paled with shame. She couldn't hold her head up. The fight drained out of her, and she simply plopped down on the ground in the middle of the hallway, wailing at the top of her lungs and throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child. "Why is my life so bitter?" she howled. "My mother worked so hard to raise my brother, and now that she's gone, she left nothing behind. It's all been taken by this poisonous woman. Mom, take me with you." It wasn't until the police arrived, called by a weary neighbor, that the farce finally came to an end. They escorted a sobbing, defeated Rhiannon from the building. I knew this wouldn't be the last of it. To prevent her or any other vulture from the Vance family from circling again, I acted quickly. I sold the apartment, the site of so much pain, at a slightly below market price for a fast cash sale. I took the money from the sale and the insurance payout, and we fled far away to a new city where the name Vance meant nothing. 4 years later, I stood in the audience of a grand university hall, watching Lysander, my firstborn, stride across the stage to receive his diploma from a top-tier institution. He had landed a job at a major corporation, his future bright and unburdened. Orion too was thriving in high school, his path clear and supported. And I? My early investment of sweat and faith in Uncle Lin's factory had secured me substantial annual dividends. I had my own income, my own life, my own peace. We all have a future now, forged in the fires of a painful past but built with our own hands. The ghost of Alara Vance is gone. In her place stands simply Alara, a woman who is finally, completely and gloriously free. The end.